Welcome to the show. Great to have you with us here another week here in the dead of summer, and have a great show planned for you. Later on, I'll have with me Cameron football head coach Scott Holt, who will be leading the West Virginia All-Star team in this year's OVAC Rudy Mumley Classic. It's just about a week away, maybe 2 weeks away now, but they'll report to camp in about a week. But it'll be good to talk to him, hear all the things he has to say about how they go about picking those teams and the upcoming high school football season. But first, we'll start off with some of our usual features. I'm going to start with a quote that I think is appropriate this time of year. And this comes from Anton Chekhov, who actually was a Russian playwright. And he said, "People don't notice whether it's winter or summer when they're happy." And I thought that was a particularly suitable one, because I've seen a lot of posts on Facebook where people saying, "Hey, remember when there was all this snow out there? Now you're complaining about the heat." And the weather's the weather. It's going to change unless you want to move to San Diego or somewhere like that where it stays pretty steady year round. But I like seeing the seasons change. I love seeing it go from spring to summer. I love seeing it go from summer to fall the most, because I love that time of year, seeing the leaves change. I love football season. But there's something to be said about the summer that you can only appreciate if you've had the winter, and vice versa. And so I think it's right that if you're just happy and don't worry about the weather because you can't change it, and don't let it affect you, then you're going to be okay. So good quote there from Anton Chekhov. Talk a little bit about the United States Supreme Court. Maybe a little bit of a surprise opening. Justice Kennedy announcing his retirement, and rather quickly, President Trump has announced his selection to fill that vacancy with Judge Kavanaugh, who's a judge, a federal judge in Washington, D.C., who was actually a former clerk once upon a time for Justice Kennedy, but a relatively young man, 53 years old. And the reason that's of significance, of course, is because members of the Supreme Court are on there for life. It's a lifetime appointment. They're there until they either die or retire. So you have someone who's 53 years old that could be on the court for another, say, 30, 35 years or so. And this is now President Trump's second opportunity to appoint someone to the Supreme Court. Some presidents may get one opportunity to do that during their tenure, some none. So to have two this quickly, less than 2 years into his presidency, really is an opportunity for him to reshape the court for decades to come. You look at a particular spot like this, and you're talking about, perhaps the next vacancy for this particular seat might be sometime approaching 2050, somewhere in that range. So, long time and a relatively conservative judge. Judge Kavanaugh is expected to be. Now, he'll have to be confirmed by the Senate. That's the way this process works, is the president announces his appointment, then the Senate has to confirm that appointment and actually approve it. And there's going to be a long, drawn-out battle. I mean, the Democrats are not happy about the fact that when Justice Scalia died, when President Obama was still in office, President Obama nominated someone for that position, and the Republican-controlled Congress delayed that process so that President Trump could make the selection once he took office, as opposed to President Obama's selection being able to take that seat. So the Democrats are going to do everything they can to try to delay that, but of course the Republicans still have a majority, and they can invoke certain rules that allow a simple majority to be able to go through with that appointment. And that's what's likely to happen. It may be drawn out for a while. There's going to be a lot of confirmation hearings where Judge Kavanaugh will be questioned about his views and the way he would handle things, approach things. But I have very mixed feelings about all this. Number one is that the man appears to be eminently qualified to be a Supreme Court justice. He's a Yale graduate. He's served for 10 years as a federal judge. Has clerked for the United States Supreme Court in his earlier days, seems to have all the credentials. At the same time, I understand why perhaps the Democrats are upset about the way this process is borne out with respect to these Supreme Court justice appointments and how it went with the end of President Obama's tenure. But the bottom line is, if someone is qualified, they meet all the qualifications, political views aside, a man should probably be confirmed and take his seat if he's qualified. So even if I may not exactly agree with all of his viewpoints or the way he would rule on things, and I have my own opinions as a lawyer and as a citizen at times on those things. But if the man is qualified, my view is, if they're qualified, then they take their spot. We'll see what happens. I think it's going to play out for a while here, and perhaps even through the November election, and because there'll be a different Congress after that point. So we'll see if that gets dragged on until perhaps there's a different Congress, and then see what happens there. So we'll keep an eye. Speaking of Supreme Court, the West Virginia Supreme Court, I've talked about that a little bit on the show the last couple editions of the show. Of course, Justice Lawfrey, impeachment proceedings are being considered by the House Judiciary Committee. He's been indicted by the federal grand jury. That seat looks like it's likely going to be open, and people have started throwing their hat into the ring. Speaker of the House, Tim Armstead, has recused himself from any impeachment proceedings because he's already announced he will not be running for the House of Delegates again, and part of the reason for that is he's considering a run for the West Virginia Supreme Court. I think he likely will. Attorney Bill Schwartz from down in Charleston has filed pre-candidacy papers. So there are people already looking and saying, I'm eyeing up this seat in 2020 in all likelihood, because there would have to be a vacancy on the court before August 14, as I've mentioned before, in order for it to be on the ballot this November. And it looks like the legislature is probably going to delay the process enough where the governor will appoint someone until the next election. So if it doesn't happen by August 14th where there's a vacancy, then the governor gets to appoint, because there won't be enough time for it to go on the November ballot. So that's what's likely to happen, but people are already eyeing up a Supreme Court seat for the next time around. So we'll continue to keep an eye on who may file pre-candidacy papers and who may be interested in that particular position. Last thing I want to mention, speaking of politics, is if you live in the northern panhandle of West Virginia like I do, you probably got this in your mail this week, which is from the office of Congressman David B. McKinley, PE, which I think is interesting. The PE is, I guess, because he's an engineer. It's mentioned here on the thing, but it says, proudly serving West Virginia's 1st Congressional District, Spring 2018 Action Update on our National Opioid Crisis. And it's the cover page, and 4 pages total, front and back, and then 2 inside. And you know, the thing that troubled me about it was on the back where it says U.S. House of Representatives, public document, official business. Then it says this mailing was prepared, published, and mailed at taxpayer expense. I thought, what am I paying for here? Since taxpayers are paying for this. And what I found was, you know, everything in here seems to be, you know, it's a picture of Congressman McKinley on the front. Inside, there's 2 more pictures of him. On the back, here's a picture of him. And then it's all about Congressman McKinley. And I was expecting a legislative update talking about what all the congressmen have been doing and what laws are being passed in order to, you know, try to help with the opioid crisis. But it's not, and I find it somewhat coincidental that this dropped into my mailbox. It says Spring 2018, which I thought was interesting too, Spring 2018, and I got this here the week of the 4th of July, last week, in my mailbox leading up to this November's election, you know, just outside the 90-day window for you know, election campaigns. And it's all promoting what Congressman McKinley has done, and it's paid for at taxpayer expense. So I thought, well, that doesn't seem right to me. I don't want to be paying for this. I mean, if you're going to update us on what's been happening, you know, in the legislature, then tell us what all the legislators have been doing. Tell us what laws have been passed. So then I started looking a little bit more. According to OpenSecrets.org website, Center for Responsible Politics, this year alone, now remember the election is not even until November, Congressman McKinley has already received over $20,000 in contributions from the pharmaceuticals and health products industry. And here he's talking about what he's doing to solve the opioid crisis and how he's trying to help it. Then he's received over $20,000 in contributions from that industry. And so I looked a little further and said, well, over the course of his career as a congressman, how much has he received? Well, according to OpenSecrets.org, the Center for Responsible Politics, over the course of his career here, he's received over $135,000 in contributions from that industry in his career. So that troubles me, that, you know, here he's trying to tout that he's attacking the opioid crisis, and this is all about him, not what laws are being passed by all of the Congress and what's being done by all the Congress to try to solve this crisis we have, but he's also been receiving all these contributions from the pharmaceuticals and health products industry. So very, very, very troubling, and I just don't want to see my taxpayer money being spent that way, and I don't want to see someone who's saying, this is what I'm doing, but then is receiving contributions. Turn the contributions down. If you really believe you're trying to attack the healthcare industry, and if you're really trying to do something about this crisis that we have, don't take their money. Don't take their contributions. You know, say, I'm not enough. You know, I don't want your money. I'm going to try to solve this problem. So I hope that some things change there with respect to how things are being done in Congress. We've seen too much of that. Of course, Congressman McKinley is opposed this fall by Kendra Furshey, who's a law professor at WVU, and we'll see what happens. But it's a race we'll keep our eye on as we head toward the fall in November. We need to take a break. When I come back, I'll have Scott Holt, the head football coach at Cameron High School, who will be coaching the West Virginia All-Stars in the upcoming OVAC All-Star game with me. Stay with us here on the Jamie Bordas Show.
When reviewing your oil and gas offers or royalty check statements, do you wonder, am I being offered a fair amount? Do I feel comfortable reading the statement? Do I have peace of mind? If you answered no to these questions, you need Bordas Mineral Management. Our passion is helping mineral owners protect and expand their mineral wealth. Our examiners tell you whether you're being treated fairly and getting paid what is rightfully yours. Bordas Mineral Management. Be protected. Have peace of mind.
Recommended by the highest authorities. Danoon Lumber.
Looks like a bad one's coming. Yeah. Right?
Welcome back to the show. It's my favorite time each week when I have a guest with me. This week's no different. I have Scott Holt with me, who's the head football coach at Cameron High School and will be also the head coach of the West Virginia All-Stars for the Rudy Mumley OVAC All-Star game that's coming up here on July 28th. Always a great event and a great time here in the Ohio Valley. And Scott, it's great to have you here on the show.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
You know, you have a long history with this game, unlike many people do. I mean, you've been a part of it in many different roles over the course of the years.
Yeah, this is role number 5 actually. So started in 1996 as a manager for Jim Thomas's staff when he coached the game, our mentor, and you know, as a player in '97. Coached the game as an assistant in 2000. Last year headed up the youth clinic that gets run for free every year, and then this year as head coach. So this is role number 5.
It's a lot of fun. I mean, I haven't had that many roles. I've been a part of it as an assistant coach, and really had a blast. You know, getting to know the guys from around the valley, spending a week up there in the dorms, and just all the different things, the pomp and circumstance that goes with it, and of course then the game itself. And we were fortunate to be able to win the game on behalf of West Virginia the year I coached it. And you know, you've had the benefit of playing all those different roles that you just mentioned that I haven't had. You know, what's been your favorite so far? And then what about now the opportunity to be a head coach?
You know, obviously getting to know the people from around the valley, and the people that you prepare for and that you work so hard to beat year in, year out for 4 seasons of these kids going through high school, to get to know them on a personal level, to really share that experience, to make connections that we still have. I played in '97, and for a period of about 10 years, every year my team, it would get smaller and smaller every year, but the kids would meet underneath the scoreboard every year at halftime of that very game. So those friendships last a lifetime, those relationships carry on throughout the game, and it really is something that brings the valley together, and any opportunity you have to do that in this day and age is a good thing.
Of course, getting to coach this game, a great reward for you, your program at Cameron. Over the last 2 seasons, only 1 regular season loss in the last 2 years, which is unbelievable, really, especially for a small school, a rural school like Cameron, to have gone 19-1 over the last couple of years here, gotten to the playoffs, all the things you've done. Now this, reward for you and your staff to be able to do this, and really a nice thing for the city of Cameron. Yeah,
we're really excited. The entire staff has come to this game. We've done a lot of preparation work, and a lot goes into selecting the kids that we do. But to put Cameron on that stage and to have our coaches spotlighted for a night is really something special for them, special for me.
People may not understand how the teams get selected. I mean, there's people read about it in the paper. Maybe now the wide receivers, the running backs. I mean, they're announced in the paper but this is done over a period of months. Really, that's a big process.
Yeah, usually right after the regular season, there's a mailer sent out to all the coaches in the OVAC, ask for nominations of players that they feel could play in this game. And who would be able to have that time in July to play in this game. So I believe we had over 80 nominations, with which we had to select 32 players. You're limited to 3 players for school. You can take up to 4 players from 2 schools. So we go through that process. We watch a lot of film on these kids, which nowadays you have that availability to watch film online. And so, we were very careful in evaluating and selecting the players based upon coaches' recommendations, character recommendations, and talent that will help us win the game to get a team together.
One of the challenges I found when I was coaching the game was that all right, you've got a week. You've never even met these guys before. You shake their hand for the first time, and all of a sudden, you got to play a football game next week, and they don't know any of your plays. They don't know any of your defensive schemes. So you have that small window to get it in. So, what's the plan? How do you get that all done?
What we've really tried to do beforehand is kind of break down what we want to do and when we want to do it. Obviously you can't put in your full complement of plays and things that you normally have going into a regular season where you have month or sometimes more than that to prepare. So you pare down the game plan a little bit. You decide what you need to do in order to win and really start weeding things out. The OVSC gives you plenty of time, usually 4 hours of practice a day to get those things done. And so we feel like we have enough time to accomplish what we want to. But you're right, it is a chore definitely to put together a team, put together a game plan, and really put these kids into some roles that they haven't been in throughout their 4 seasons in order to play in this All-Star game.
All the games, although the game's a lot of fun, it's also some significant responsibility. You've got 32 kids that are 18 years old or 19 years old that are just graduated from high school and heading off to college, and they're out there in dorms, things like that. And you and I coached together in the North-South game down in Charleston, in addition to other games. And you got to keep track of all those guys, make sure they're staying on the right path. In addition to, and one of the things I found was most of them are pretty good kids, but you do have to keep an eye. So.
Yeah, and to a man, every single player that we've selected has had a glowing recommendation from their coach. So if you live on the West Virginia side of the river anyway, and I'm sure Ohio's no different, you should be proud of the kids that these West Virginia schools are putting out. Not only athletically, but character-wise, they've all gotten glowing recommendations from their coaches.
One of the tough things is probably to figure out which lineman you're going to select. Everybody hears and reads in the papers about the guys scoring the touchdowns every fall, and you can kind of know, all right, this guy must be a good receiver. I see him on the news every week, and this guy must be a pretty good running back. But you don't hear as much about the linemen, so, and that's a big part of the game.
Right, and kind of the unwritten rule when we talk as West Virginia coaches is try to go to the biggest schools and get those linemen, because those are the kids that have been through the battles and the wars. Called Wheeling Park. They had no senior offensive linemen this year. A few kids from university that we selected couldn't play. A 300-pound lineman from Morgantown couldn't play. So this year you're going to see a little more local flair in the game, especially up front. You're going to see some smaller school players. You're going to see some kids that filled a role in single and double A schools that are going to be forced into those positions to start and hopefully win us the game.
What you report about a week before the game. What are you looking forward to the most with respect to this year's game?
I'm looking forward to seeing really this athletic group come together from West Virginia. The skill positions that we've had to fill, the running backs, the quarterbacks, the wide receivers, has just been a joy to watch these kids on film. And I can't wait to see them all together in one huddle. That's going to be a lot of fun. Just preparing that time and really spending a little bit of downtime before the regular season gets going for us as well, because once that starts, you tend to lose track of a lot of things as a staff and as a group. So just getting to slow down and coach the game you love to coach and enjoy it, and get on that big stage. It's going to be a lot of fun.
We need to take a break. When we come back, we'll continue talking with Scott Holt a little bit about some of the changes that have been taking place in the game over the course of the last number of years now. Stay with us here on the Jamie Bordas Show.
At Ultra Big Bank, we need to be assured you can make your payments. Yes. Well, buy them out. Acquire. As I was saying, I'm not sure I see the value in your small account.
That's when we went to Belmont Savings. They took the time to understand our needs.
And they didn't make us feel small. Where the big banks are only interested in growing, Belmont Savings' interest was in us.
Belmont Savings Bank, focused on your future.
So, how was your first day?
Long. So, Josh asked me about you.
Daddy's home. Go get him.
For your home, for your life, for more than 50 years. The Hardwood Specialists, DeNoon Lumber.
Welcome back to the show. I've been speaking with my guest this week, Cameron High School head football coach Scott Holt, who will be coaching the West Virginia All-Stars in the upcoming OVAC All-Star game on July 28th at Wheeling Island Stadium. And Scott, I want to talk a little bit about the the changes in the game over the past 20 years or so that you've been involved with coaching, and even before that as a player, a lot of differences, from the days back in the 90s and early 2000s, even to right now in a relatively short period of time.
Yeah, it seems like the spread offenses have taken over, and your athletes need to be able to play in a little bit of space. Back in the days when we played, which doesn't seem like that long ago, but I think it was. It wasn't uncommon to be, butting up against a guy that was as far away as we are now. And, now you spread these kids out. They're 20, 30, 40 yards away from each other at a full sprint a lot of times. So the contact might seem a little more severe, and I think that's because the game gets played in a lot more space. But certainly I think we're much more aware of sports medicine, physical training, especially concussion issues. So while the game has gotten a little bit more in space, I think we've done a great job of, as a coaching community, as a training community, of really responding to the needs of our players.
You look at the concussion issue, and if you actually read about it, I mean, it's not just football. I mean, you look at soccer, from heading the ball, and different sports. I mean, I think medicine's just advanced where we recognize more now when people are having problems. I don't know if it's as much that there are more of them going on, it's just that we recognize it and deal with it more. Whereas back in the day, your head hurts a little bit, take some Tylenol, you'll be okay. Now, a kid gets a concussion, it because they can go and they can be tested and see what their baseline was and where they are compared to that, and they're not going back until they return to normal. So.
Yeah, and fortunately we've had a lot of cooperation from local hospitals, local sports medicine, to get these kids baseline tested, to make sure that when they do have a head injury, that they're ready to play, physically ready to play when they come back. We've had a lot of concussion training. The state of West Virginia makes coaches in every sport across the board do a concussion training every single year. That's an online class with a test, and so coaches are well aware of concussion signs and symptoms. Officials are aware of concussion signs and symptoms, and I think that the public has done a good job of making sure that coaches, physicians, trainers, we're all held accountable when it comes to young people and putting them back into the game.
One of the other issues involved in the kind of where medicine and football kind of intersect is with the heat. There have been a lot of changes also with respect to that, compared to when we played, and sometimes you practice almost always twice a day in the summer, and sometimes 3 times to where we are today.
Yeah, and a lot of people who played in the 60s and 70s might look at the practices now and say, well, that's a softer brand of football. Trust me, it's not. It's just a little more well thought out brand of football. The state of West Virginia, again, has put in place guidelines for temperature and humidity, which we take every day before practice. They put into guidelines the amount of contact you can have, no more than 45 minutes of live contact a week. We're not allowed to do more than 3 hours of physical activity at a time, and that includes weightlifting, running, conditioning, without a 3-hour break before going back. 2-a-days can still exist, but they don't exist on back-to-back days, so you got to take a day off in between. So I think the state of West Virginia has really gotten ahead of the issue in order to keep athletes safe and really keep people participating. It's a lot to ask of young people to give so much time and so much effort and not make sure they're as prepared physically as they can be before the season starts.
What are the biggest changes you've seen with respect to, looking at the kids, the players themselves, in terms of skill sets? I mean, I know one of the things that I noticed, I've been out of this for 1.5 years now of coaching high school football, but I noticed just things like kids don't know how to catch a punt anymore, because you don't see the sandlot, the things that kids used to learn out playing pickup games. They don't really do that anymore, so they don't have those skills.
Right, that's a great point. The backyard skills have eroded somewhat. You don't find as many punters and kickers and kids to return those as you used to. The good news is you don't get them with as many maybe bad habits from those backyard football days. So you find yourself teaching a lot more of the basic skills to maybe 7th, 9th graders that are just getting into the game. But and again, the youth levels where kids are starting to play football in 2nd, 3rd, 4th grade are doing a much better job of teaching these skills, so that when you get them in the 9th grade, they know exactly what you're talking about. We might use a little bit different verbiage, but the skill that they're learning and mastering is pretty much the same.
Scott, I really appreciate you being here on the show. Good luck with the All-Star game. I know you'll have a great time. I know you'll have those kids ready to play, and good luck with your Cameron team this season. I know people will be watching. You know, it's always tough. You lost a lot of top-notch players off of the teams you've had the last couple of years, but I know you'll have them ready again, and I know what a great coach you are because I've coached with you for a number of years, and you're one of the best there is. So.
Thanks. Well, your support, your friendship mean a lot to me throughout the season, throughout the year, so appreciate you having me on.
Sure thing.
Thanks
for being here. We need to take a break. When we come back, we'll wrap up with a little more sports. We'll talk to Pittsburgh Pirates, what's going on with them. Stay with us here on the Jamie Bordas Show.
People in nursing homes are some of the most vulnerable members of our society. They're there because they can't take care of themselves. Those facilities have a duty to take care of our loved ones, and when they don't, it's important they're held accountable. We've not only collected record results against negligent nursing homes, but more importantly, we've helped so many families get the answers and closure they so badly needed.
Bordas and Bordas, fighting for justice.
We're Panhandle Cleaning and Restoration, and we're gonna save you. We've got it down to a science, an absolute state of art. We do it all, restoration, cleaning, and reconstruction. When disaster strikes, just pick up the phone. We're Panhandle Cleaning and Restoration, and we're gonna save you.
Welcome back to the show. It's time to talk sports, although we've kind of been doing that for most of the show with Coach Holt, but we'll talk a little bit of professional sports and especially the Pittsburgh Pirates. You know, all right, I'm throwing in the towel. I said I wasn't going to do it yet on the last show, but I said if they could get to 5 games above 500 by the All-Star break, that I would say they had a shot, but the ship has sailed. The Pirates are not going to make the playoffs. At the beginning of the year, I said they'd finish first or second in the division. I'm giving up a little bit of hope here. I think they're going to have to make some moves here, trade some guys, bring in some young talent, and use the farm system and try to get them ready for next year and the year after, because this season's just gone. Unfortunately, the Pirates, since I started looking, about 2-3 weeks ago at what they would need to do, they've slipped further the other direction. They're closer to last place than they are to first. And so it just doesn't look like it's going to happen this year, which is unfortunate. And, the guys that, were moved in the offseason, Andrew McCutcheon, Garrett Cole, doing fantastic, in Houston. Sad to see those guys go. Glad they're doing well where they are, but it's not the Pirates here. All-Star game's coming up. Felipe Vasquez is on the All-Star team, and people say, well, how can he be? I watch him, he come in, and he doesn't pitch the way you should. Well, every team gets one. That's the way it goes. Every team gets one player picked and gets a representative in the All-Star game, so he's the Pirates' representative in the All-Star game. A little bit of a sad state of affairs there, but we'll keep an eye on, see if what happens as the July 31 trade deadline approaches. That's all the time that we have this week. I appreciate you watching again. We'll see you on the next edition of the Jamie Bordas Show.